This is Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom Hartmann on the Thom Hartmann program. Thanks for listening. Joining us now is Representative Mark Pocan, who is a leading light of the progressive movement in Congress and is a regular guest on this program. So, Congressman, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, so glad to be here, Richard. Thank you.
Oh, listen, I'm looking forward to talking to you because this has been such an interesting week. And, you know, I guess I'd love to start with this. This sentence from the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan: "Give me a break on this." This was said because the Republicans, as I understand it, but you tell me, their ideologically driven extreme budget is more important to them than protecting American families and American children from Zika. Why are they, this is over Planned Parenthood and so on, right? So why isn't he, this is pretty far out stuff to me. What's going on?
You know, Paul Ryan has really given the keys to the car to the Tea Party. And the Tea Party don't fundamentally believe in government. They don't want to get things done, including things as important as funding to address the Zika virus. So there was a bill that came out of the Senate, bipartisan. I think it had 68 votes. And it came over and it died in the House. And then they went to conference committee and they threw in a bunch of stuff about Planned Parenthood and other side issues that were, you know, the red meat for the Tea Party. And then they, you know, are surprised that things aren't moving when, you know, there was a bipartisan bill that came over from the Senate. And once again, the House, where, you know, the Republicans don't control the House per se, the Tea Party controls the House. And Paul Ryan has given them the keys. They're calling the shots, and they simply won't let a clean bill go through. They would rather have people in this country face the Zika virus and face the complications and what we don't even know about the Zika virus, rather than not take this as an opportunity to score a political point.
Well, you know, and there, I have to say, in my opinion, there is a very, very bitter irony in this, in that the Zika virus affects unborn children. And they are constantly lecturing others on what to do with their body, women in particular, over their supposed support for unborn children, and yet their political partisanship will allow them to fail to protect something that we know is a medical threat. It just seems to me to be the grossest kind of hypocrisy. Am I unfair in that?
No, in fact, let me give you one to add to that sandwich, which is this also affects people predominantly in the South, although you can be anywhere in the country where you might catch it somewhere and then bring it back. But the mosquitoes are hitting the southern part of the United States, which is predominantly represented by Republicans. So even their own colleagues, they don't have enough respect for to pass something that would help their constituents first and foremost because of this ideological drive they have. So this is the problem. You know, this week we took up bills about hedge, you know, it was our Hug a Hedge Fund Manager week, right? Because, you know, they're trying to raise a few additional dollars before the November election. But we didn't deal with Zika. We didn't deal with Flint. And we didn't pass an energy and water appropriations bill or a bunch of other appropriation bills. We didn't do any of the things that Congress historically does and has done because, again, they don't this place is run by the Tea Party, and unless things change in November, you're going to have 2 more years of this crap.
You know, and again, we're talking with Representative Mark Pocan. So here's what we've got, it seems to me, but you tell me. First of all, I always thought Paul Ryan was pretty far to the right, and, you know, I've written about when he's published his budgets, they're like those Western towns where there aren't really, for the movies, where they aren't really buildings, they're just facades. There was nothing to it. It was a far-right document to me. Now we have even further right with the Tea Party, and it seems to me that, without being too unkind to Speaker Ryan, that he's become the kind of a human face of this far-right extremism that is gutting the government and hurting a lot of people.
I actually today, Richard, had a Republican member say to me, because we had this very conversation, and I said, yeah, Paul's letting the Tea Party, you know, run the place. And they said, no. He's also of their values. It's just he doesn't do it in the same way. So don't think that it's like someone else having control. I mean, he's a neoconservative. He believes in policies of austerity. He's the one who wants to privatize things like Social Security. I mean, these terrible ideas are truly Paul Ryan's terrible ideas. It's the problem is he can't even get his terrible ideas done if you have the philosophy of the Tea Party folks here who fundamentally don't believe in government. And that's been the breakdown we've had. I mean, we didn't pass a budget. We haven't passed appropriation bills. We'll have another continuing resolution or an omnibus very likely. The problem with that is a couple handfuls of people will draft that bill. We'll have 48 hours to review it, like it generally happens. It's unamendable. And that's not democratic in a small d sense at all. So, you know, what they're doing is against everything they say they believe in. But, you know, let's not forget, Paul is a neoconservative. He's the one who wants to privatize Social Security and Medicare. He's the one who wants to cut programs to austerity levels that would have devastating impacts. His policies aren't exactly a picnic. It's just, you know, he would at least try to move something. Right now, nothing moves because of that 40 to 50 hardcore block of Tea Party people that essentially veto what they can put on the floor.
Right. You know, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm so glad to hear you say that because, again, he is. When you can't even push your far-right agenda through because the further right, for example, you know, Paul Ryan, I remember when he was representing the furthest right of the debate, let's say a few years ago, you know, no, we're not trying to abolish Medicare. We're just going to abolish the thing that you know is Medicare.
Yeah.
And we'll give you, it's like saying, I'm not going to close down the subways. I'm going to close down the subways. I'll give you $1 towards a taxi cab ride, and I'm going to call it a subway. You know, no, it's not what you know anymore. So yeah, this guy, it's terrifying to me, frankly, to think that he no longer represents the furthest right of the debate. And let me ask you a question related to that, because this is on my mind a lot. I think about this a lot. And it may seem like a harsh question in a certain sense, but how can Democrats, even with gerrymandering and everything else, how can Democrats be losing to these people?
You know, gerrymandering is a huge, huge component of this because when you only have, I would argue, 70, maybe 80 competitive districts out of 435 in the House of Representatives, you've got a very limited playing field out of the total number of districts. Now, this could be a very good year for us. You know, I think that Donald Trump could very likely, so to speak, flush the Republican Party down the toilet as we know it. But don't forget, he's an incarnation of this Republican Party. The Tea Party, all the actions they've done since 2010 have given them Donald Trump as a nominee. But if we can actually pick up the 30 seats in the House, I'm confident we'll pick up the Senate, and I think we'll pick up the White House. But if we can pick up the House, we can finally put an end to this and just move things forward. So you know, there's a lot at stake in November, and you know, Donald Trump's campaign, while it may appear to people like us going, how could anyone vote for him? You know, he still has a lot of support. But a lot of folks aren't going to come out and vote for him, and they may not then come out and vote for the congressional races. We have a true opportunity in November to change the course of what's been happening since 2010.
Well, I think that's so important, and every chance I get, I talk to people about down-ballot races, not just the presidency, that it's so important to elect progressives to Congress and to elect a different Congress. I guess, you know, you touched on something, Representative Pocan, that I think is so important, which I think is, you know, when Republicans say, and we can talk about Paul Ryan too in this, but when Republicans say, well, Trump, I don't really like what he says, to me, what they're really saying is, I don't like him saying out loud what I've only been hinting at for the last 20 years.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's a product of everything that's been happening in Congress since 2010 when the Tea Party came to power. So now, if for any Republican to say, oh, my God, now we have Donald Trump, no, this is the natural progression of the agenda they've put out there and the red meat they've thrown out there and the racist, misogynistic, xenophobic sort of attitudes and bills and comments that have been out there. That's what brings you Donald Trump. But they came from the same people that are many of these congressional folks here in Washington. So, you know, they can't be surprised or upset with him when really they've created him. And like you said, this is the philosophy they also have. They just don't say it as brazenly as Donald Trump because he's not a politician. They're smart enough to hold it back in their heads a little bit. But this is why we have to change the course of what's been happening, because it is very frustrating to realize that, we can vote 64 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and we can't deal with something like the Zika virus. I mean, the fact that this week we're passing bills that aren't going to become law that would loosen standards for hedge fund managers and the financial industry that brought us 2008 and the crash, but we can't deal with the people of Flint, Michigan, who still, and across the country, who have lead in their water. I mean, it just the contrasts are so clear that those aren't Democratic and Republican contrasts. Those are just where are we as a nation contrasts.
Well, and what you're saying speaks so strongly to the fact, in my mind, that not only do we need to win every race that we possibly can, but we also need to fight for those state houses so that when 2020 comes and there's a new census, hopefully we can get a little less gerrymandering in the next decade than we've had in this decade. I guess last question before I let you go, if you don't mind. They're talking about impeaching the IRS commissioner?
Yeah. Yeah, and the chair of the committee said, I think we should even go farther. In other words, they want to impeach more people as well. But again, that's ridiculous in the list that we just talked about. We haven't done anything about gun violence. We haven't really fully addressed the opioid crisis the way we should. We haven't dealt with things like Flint, Michigan, and lead in water and infrastructure. We haven't passed appropriation bills or a budget. September 30th, if we don't do something with a continuing resolution, would be shutting down government, and even then it may only be for a couple months, and they're more worried about taking care of those poor, unfortunate hedge fund managers and impeaching the IRS commissioner and maybe admonishing the Democrats for having the sit-in because we finally got mad enough that we wanted to get something done. If that's their agenda, we're going to pick up the 30 seats because people are going to realize they only have an alternative to this, and that's the Democrats.
I got to say, Representative Mark Pocan, I have so much admiration for you going in there every day and dealing with this. I don't know how you do it and stay sane.
I'll tell you, there are days I ask that question, but, it will get better. There is no question. And there are good people, and I'll be honest, there are good people in both parties here that want to get things done. It's not – they want you to think this is a giant fight between Democrats and Republicans who can't get along. Dogs and cats will never lie together. And in the reality is it's a fight among the Tea Party and the rest of the Republican Party, and we're not even in this fight. But as long as that fight continues under the current way that we have the people running the House, you're going to continue to have this problem. So the only way you change it is either you defeat Tea Party people in primaries, and we only did, I think, one this year in Kansas, and there's still 40 or 50 of them left, or you have to switch who's in the majority. And it's not about Democrats or Republicans, it's just about change. How do you actually get us to do something again in Congress?
Well, more power to you, sir, and thanks for your good work, and thanks for coming on the program.
Absolutely, Richard. Thank you.
And we're going to have to take a break, but listen, it's a crazy world out there. We'll do what we can. Richard R.J. Eskow sitting in for Thom on the Thom Hartmann Show.